It's 7:30 and we'll call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. As always, we start with public comment, seeing no one other than a town official in the audience. I assume there's no public comment. Jen?
No.
Is there any emails?
Nope, we haven't received anything.
Okay. First item on the agenda is to discuss and take action on a request for a transfer of $25,452 to the Registrars of Voters Elections accounts.
This is a fiscal 23 transfer. In the budget, we planned for just the November election. We did end up having a primary as well as an election audit, so that pushed up their expenses for things like poll workers, ballot printing, memory card, programming, those types of things. So what we've done in the past, we budget for the known elections and we use contingency to cover any additional election expense. So that's what this is doing, moving within their account and covering the balance of $9,153 from contingency.
Are the accounts that are funding the transfer all within the Registrar of Voter Department?
Yes, between their elections and registry accounts.
And the second question I had, well, that's the only question I had on the transfer. I have a related question. Any other questions on the transfer?
No.
Comments?
No.
Second question I had is, should we consider replacing our ballot tabulators, considering we can't find anyone that makes parts for them any longer, according to us?
That would be a question for the registrars of voters. I'm not sure where they stand on that or what kind of leeway they even have on what they can select.
A note for the budget, upcoming budget cycle.
Definitely.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the transfer of $25,452 to the Registrar of Voter Election accounts? John Wolcott, second. Rob, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, second item is another transfer of $5,593 to the Copier Leases account.
We centralize all of our copier expenses within the town administrator's central services account. So the copier leases have a regular monthly charge, but also a volume limit, which was set for a monthly limit. And we found that we went over the monthly allowance a couple of times, so we're requesting to transfer $5,500 to copiers, and then going forward, we've been able to get it onto an annual limit, so that should eliminate the problem, because overall annually we're fine.
So these are some of the months that went over.
Yep.
Excuse me.
On the volume.
Any other questions?
No.
Can I have a motion to approve the transfer of $5,593 to the Copier Leases account? Dave, second. Rob, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, the third item is to discuss and take action on a request to transfer $159,000 to the Board of Finance Capital Reserve.
This is related to what we did last meeting with ARPA. You did approve funding the fire marshal vehicle and the EMS vehicle out of ARPA. They were funded in the fiscal 24 budget. So what we're looking to do with this transfer is to close out the projects in RFC and RE and move them over to your capital reserve.
So at the last meeting, we identified these as transfers, and we're taking action tonight.
Correct.
Okay, we discussed this at the last meeting. Any further discussion required? May I have a motion to transfer $159,000 to the Board of Finance Capital Reserve? Dave. Second. Rob. All in favor? Okay. I think I'm about 30 minutes ahead of Jim's pace, right? That was for you, Jim. All right, fourth item is to discuss and take action on a request to appropriate $785,000 of ARPA funds for the replacement of the DPW garage floor. I see Ed Gentile in the audience. Ed, would you like to address this item?
You guys seem to be on a roll, though, I figured I'd more than happy.
You thought you were going to get away
You're
easy.
happy, you're happy to let us approve it without comment? Is that what you're saying?
Sorry.
And to clarify, this would be funded out of the ARPA contingency account.
Good evening, Ed Gentile, Director of Public Works.
What you see in front of you, a special appropriation, is for the, as you said, the repair of the concrete floors. These 5 bays are located on the east side of the garage. It faces the swap shop. As I noted in the the description, it was not part of the original work that we did on the garage, the rehab work we did in 2018. What we did do, because we identified the floor defects, we had gone in and we had done removal of concrete. About 10-15% of the floor, we chipped it up, went down to steel, rebar, we epoxied it, put high-strength concrete in, and then we came in and we epoxied the whole floor. The hope there was that we'd get longevity out of the floor, and hopefully the structural integrity was intact. After loading it up with the heavy vac truck and the loaders over the last 3 or 4 years, we started to see deterioration, cracking in the epoxy, then the floor, and then we went into a mode where actually we cannot park the vac truck in there anymore. We have it stored in the wash bay right now. The loader we've put out in another bay temporarily. So we can't load the floor right now. We pushed ahead with a design in January, put it out to bid in February. Good question that I did receive. We did only get 1 bidder on the project, but we contacted 9 contracting companies and we sent them the information to bid on it. We got some good questions back. We thought we'd get a good competitive bid environment. We ended up with 1 bidder. Now to our credit, I guess, is we did work well with the low bidder previously. He did actually the floor replacement as part of the garage rehab in 2018, where we stripped it all down and rebuilt it. That work he has done has held up. We have no issues with that floor right now. So I think we have a good contractor. I believe we have a good bid too. It was just around the engineer's estimate of around $400,000, I believe. The additional costs that you're seeing in here right now are the relocation of all the infrastructure below the floor. Parks and Rec has the bays that are below, so we're talking about fire suppression, electricity and power that goes over to the Board of Ed piece just to the north. There's garage doors that have to come down, HVAC that has to come down. So we basically have to strip the lighting that's there. Everything has to come off the ceiling that's attached, because that ceiling won't be there any longer. So we had to bid those also.
So that equipment is part of this? Not just removing it and reattach, but it's
all part of,
equipment.
yeah, and that's how we get all the way up to $780,000 right now. I did put a contingency in there. I don't know, I wish I could say we've tried everything to explore what's in the floor, attaching to the girders, things like that, to do forming. But I felt that I needed a little safety net, so I put in about 15% contingency. It was helpful last time we did the floor on the other side. We did find some things that were a little different than what the design drawings had shown. So moving forward, I felt it was prudent to put in a contingency of that value.
The contingency, I'm trying to do the math, but it's around 85,000 something, 75,000?
102.
102,000, okay, thanks. Okay. And you had responded to a question that I had emailed, that the life of this floor is expected to match the life of the facility.
Yeah, we pushed the design a little bit heavier for the heavier loads. It's not just a standard H20 loaded. We did some extra steel replacement. We also, because we're going to be using it for a lift area, we also designed it to specifically hold a lift in a certain place. So we put extra steel beams across so that wouldn't compromise the floor as a point load. And it spans the columns that are in there. I know it's a little technical, I'm sorry, but what we're trying to do is make it so that the floor lasts longer.
Got it. And do you have any sense for why there wasn't a second or further bids, additional bids?
We did put a time constraint on this project. You can't go in there and take 4 months to do this. We are using the facility. We realized that we were going to be possibly doing it in August, in September. We need that facility back when winter gets there, and we don't want to wait till December to figure out that you're finished. The concrete's got to cure for at least 28 days. We pushed it last year to our last project. We pushed it an extra week. We were 35 days out. It does take that long to cure concrete to reach its maximum loading capacity. So we figure somewhere between 5-6 weeks to prep before you pour. Dismantling everything, forming everything, cutting everything out, the demo, all of that's going to take about 5 weeks. Add another month to 5 weeks on top of that, we're looking at, 2.5 months worth of work. So we did put a tight schedule on there, and I think that may have had something to do with it, but no one's come back and said that.
And so it sounds like you're expecting this project to start this month.
As soon as I can have the funds available, hopefully with you folks tonight, and approval from the Board of Selectmen next week, and the funds being available when Jen says they're available to go, the contract is ready to be signed.
Okay.
This may be a case of musical chairs, but you mentioned that a portion of this relates to the Board of Education. Should any of the funding come out of the Board of Education budget?
Let me reiterate that the bays are our bays. When I mentioned the Board of Ed, we had built 2 additions for the Board of Ed just north of it. The power actually runs through our lower bays to get to them. There's nothing that I could see, and I'd be probably the first one to promote it, that they should be paying for, to be honest with you.
Okay, fine. Good, thank you.
I'm sorry I confused you with that.
Is my memory terrible? I remember walking through the garage when we were talking about renovating it years ago, and I thought that the floor was like the item that got everything started. Was it a different floor?
Yes. The floors that we did replace are the 6 bays that face actually Ledge Road.
Okay.
So
This
when
is
you
different.
drive by and you look at all those bays, we tore that whole floor out of there.
Yeah, I remember that.
These
whole
bays are
conversation.
located actually, if you stand at the swap shop and face the building, they're actually tucked in behind.
Okay.
Part of the original building, I think the date is 1993, that addition was built, 2-story addition.
And at the time, we just didn't think that they were as weak as the ones in the front?
As I started off with, I thought, looking at the floor and having the engineer look at it, that we could rehab that floor rather than rip it out. The price tag to rehab it was somewhere around 30 grand. The replacement was around $500,000. So we went with that approach first to see if we could salvage the floor. It wasn't as bad as the one that we did replace as part of the project.
At the time.
Correct.
Yeah,
And now it's,
Now it's reached
Beyond, yeah.
that level.
Did we have an idea, I'm trying to think back, do we have an idea how long we thought it was going to last after it was rehabbed for that 30? Was it like it's now we're looking at probably 5 years or 6 years of it, right? Did we think it was going to go that long?
Are we talking about the floor that we're
Yeah, the
replacing
floor
now?
you were doing right now, yeah.
This is the, to be honest with you, I was hoping it was going to last until I retire. The idea,
you're
though,
not
is...
retiring, are you?
Not anytime
Okay, all
soon.
right.
The idea was, when we did the repair, that what I was stopping was the water going through the floor, but the structural integrity was still there. So the idea was, I was capping it and sealing it, and I still had some structural there. So the idea was, yes, it was going to last a whole lot longer than it has.
Any further discussion? All right, may I have a motion to appropriate $785,000 of ARPA funds for the replacement of the DPW garage floor? Rob? John? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None? Unanimous. Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much. Have a good time.
Good use of ARPA funds.
Yeah.
Yes, very good use of ARPA
Good.
funds, yes. Financial report.
Okay,
And by the way, this is through July 30th, not June, right?
this is only through June 30th. July, there's really nothing to report because we just got started. So this is the wrap-up of the prior fiscal year.
But different than what we did last time.
Yeah, we've closed out all of the purchase orders, all the final invoices. This
You do
is,
your Jen, go for it.
we're still trying some things out. We'll be turning over the books to the auditors the very beginning of September. So minor adjustments here and there. But this is pretty much the picture that we're going to end on. So up at the top, the contribution from fund balance has always been confusing, so I tried to break that out so that we can see the true over budget, what we've gotten over budget in revenue, where we're under budget in expenditure, and then with the contribution from fund balance, how that works in. So overall on revenue, we're about 3.6 million better than budget. 1.8 of that is investment income. Tax collections are about $444,000 better. And then we had some state grants that came in much higher than budget. Town Aid Road, ECS, we had a prior year adjustment for excess cost, and the MRSA sales tax sharing was one that we didn't know about at the time of the budget. We did approve special appropriations totaling $3,117,000 from fund balance. That does not include the $679,000 that we approved in June to true up RFC and RE for the TAR grant. That'll be going to RTM in September. I should have put it up at the top, but I'll talk through what that impact is. On the expenditure side, we're about $3 million better than budget. Approximately $800,000 for Board of Ed. We're still tying it out with them, but that was their estimate a little while ago. And then on the town side, it's about 2.2 million, and I've shown you what the significant variances were. Police department at $467,000. That's mostly due to vacancies.
The PD is fully staffed now?
Yeah.
I think they have one short,
Yeah.
and then we have the new position that's budgeted to begin in January.
Is it one short on the sworn officer side or the
Yes.
communication side?
On the sworn side.
Yeah,
So communications is full?
I think they are,
yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
and I think they
I think
have
they're at 9.
been for a few weeks.
They had, I think they lost, they lost somebody, yeah, it's funny. But I think they're at 9.
Yeah, it's
That's
been-
their optimum number is 9.
Yeah, I remember, it's been a long road to get
Yeah.
there.
And their savings from their vacancies were so large, they still ended up with a $330,000 surplus, but we didn't even transfer in to cover their wage increases when their contract settled in the spring. So that's actually flowing into the next one, which is contingency, where we have $421,000, and a little over $200,000 of that is the salary contingency because we didn't have to transfer for PD because of the vacancies. Public Works, a lot of that is also vacancies, about $118,000 in full-time, $91,000 in overtime. Legal, we had a $159,000 surplus for our regulatory council and about $90,000 for our just general town council. Benefits, our medical was actually $300,000 surplus. Our Social Security was around $45,000, and those are directly related to the vacancies as well. And then in the senior center, they filled a full-timer at a lower salary, and they had a part-time vacancy. So overall, the picture that I see here is on the revenue side, a lot of our surplus, or a lot of our favorable variances were really one-time events, particularly the investment income where we've adjusted the budget in fiscal '24. We wouldn't expect to see that kind of a variance in fiscal '24. The tax collections, we know we build in a budget surplus there. But the town aid road, we've adjusted for that in the budget. The ECS grant and the MRSA sales tax sharing, those shouldn't be recurring positive variances. So I think on the revenue side, there's kind of some one-time activity going on there and driving that. And then on the expenditure side, overall, the vacancies, our full-time vacancies, when you look at full-time salary, medical, Social Security, and then we have a deficit in our accrued time payout, but all of those are related to vacancies, and it totals about an $800,000 surplus from vacancies. So that's pretty significant, and most of that has been in the PD the last few years. So if they stay at or very close to fully staffed, we wouldn't expect to see those kinds of surpluses in '24. Below the significant variances is a walk down of where we'll be on fund balance. And in the middle of that, I do have the pending special appropriation to replenish RFC and RE for the TAR grant, the $679, that's pending September RTM approval. So even though overall our revenues exceeded our expenditures by 3.5 million, there's about 680,000 that we expect to appropriate from fund balance over to RFC and RE. So our change in fund balance for fiscal '23 is projected to be about 2.8 million. And that'll put us at 18% of fiscal '24 budget, about $10.4 million in excess of our 12% minimum for fund balance. Page 2 shows you our other funds, sewer operating and parking fund both ended with surpluses. They both have fairly healthy fund balances. We were worried about the parking fund balance, but this was a good contribution to the fund balance to bring it back up after it took a hit from COVID. The Recreation Program Fund is designed to zero out at the end of the year. We did transfer about $264,000 from that fund over to the general fund. We had budgeted $275,000, so we were pretty close. And the Great Island Management Fund is getting up and running, and we'll have about a $19,000 fund balance at the end of fiscal '23. And that's just a matter of timing between rental payments and facility maintenance type expenses.
So to summarize, the story of the fiscal '23 budget is surplus revenue and lower expenditures driven by principally much higher investment income, other one-time items on the revenue side, and principally vacancies on the expense side.
Yes.
The pages that follow the summary, not to go through tonight, but it seems like this would be great information for us to use in connection with the next budget cycle to show what we actually, we actually authorized and what was actually spent. And I know that number is in the, whatever it's called, the computer program.
Yep.
OpenGov. But we all have, I think, limited capacity navigating OpenGov, and this is right in front of us. So I would suggest saving this document for next year's budget cycle because the numbers are right in front of us, and we can see what's being requested versus what was actually spent.
We can add these
Right.
tabs into the master spreadsheet too.
That'd be great.
Great.
I love your
Well,
one.
yeah,
page.
like
Yeah.
hard copies instead of, because of the navigation challenges that some of us have. So,
Yeah, I
We're
just-
possibly going to give the Board of Education excuse to kid us about padding our own budget.
This is exactly the analysis that I did by hand a long time ago, and I'm so grateful for it. Thank you, Jen. And the one pager is brilliant.
yes.
Yeah, Jen, I think it follows, the couple tabs we have where you're like, put a number in here and it'll
Yeah, it'll flow through and you
flow
can see
through.
the impact.
I think these are the sub-schedules, if you want to call it that.
Right.
The sub-tabs underneath that rolls forward.
And it's great.
This is great work, by the way. Really
It's
good
great work, and as great as it is to have these surpluses, we've taxed our residents for these dollars, and it's great to lower the forthcoming tax burden, but I think we can isolate the one-time items. It seems like we probably can try to do a finer job of budgeting for whatever our next fiscal year budget will be, to try to narrow that gap.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there any way to get this, like pages 5 through whatever the last one is,
You know?
with an additional column that says, like, proposed budget, so that we see what was the budget of last year, where the final budget, is, what we spent, over and under, with a note as to why, and the budget proposal right next to it?
Yeah, we could roll it up like that probably.
In a spreadsheet,
Yeah, we'll work on updating the format that we're using in that master spreadsheet.
Thank you.
That would be incredible.
Jen, I think it's still you, financial report. Do we have some accounts to go through?
We do, so we'll skip all the,
Before we do that, any questions on these spreadsheets that follow?
all right, so page 10 is our summary of state revenues. This is no change since the last meeting, I believe. We did pretty well, the one-timers, but the court fines was interesting. Those are usually related to moving violations, and we get a share back from the state of those. And those dipped during COVID, but I think we're seeing them come back up because there's more enforcement out there. Everything else kind of tracked as expected, except for the one-timers that we couldn't really have predicted.
Right.
At the bottom of the page, I just want to call your attention to LoCIP. We did have a budget of 115. The state actually allocated us 100,000, or the budget was 100,000, then there was another adjustment, so our allocation was actually 85. And we requested reimbursement of 71,000, so that rolls from year to year. So with fiscal '24 projects, we'll comb through and we'll be able to capture what we didn't reimburse this year.
Jen, on the MRSA sales tax sharing,
Yep.
so we always budget zero because they don't specify it out, and this is just kind of, after they approve it, what they send out?
Right. Right, they don't give us a specific amount on that, it depends on what's collected.
Could we budget this? Do we have, like, the last 5 years, we've received this from the state on MRSA, so we
We
could
just started
expect-
receiving it again in fiscal '22, and I'm trying to remember, we may have budgeted a nominal amount in fiscal '24, I don't recall.
Okay,
But it hasn't been a reliable revenue source.
Okay.
Page 11 just shows you where your contingency accounts ended up.
are we okay with these low balances in our salary increase contingency accounts and the sewer and parking fund,
Those,
given where we are timetable?
yeah, those are fine.
Okay,
Those are self-contained funds, so if they overdraw on a contingency or the contingency can't afford to supplement something, it's fine. I just do want to call your attention to the Board of Finance Capital Reserve with the EMS and Fire Marshal vehicle closeout that you just did. It'll put your balance at just under $651,000.
And Jen, would you remind me, what have we hit in recent years targeted for that fund?
For the capital reserve?
Yeah.
I can go back and look and send it to you. It's been all over the place. I think this is pretty low compared to where it's been in the past because
Okay.
the board has been drawing it down and applying it towards the budget each year.
And are there any other things on the horizon that might be eligible for this fund? That we know about? That I don't know about, obviously?
Offhand, no.
Okay.
I think we're still waiting to hear back on the PD locker renovation.
Right.
But that could be ARPA or capital reserve. The Norotan Heights retaining wall, again, could go ARPA or capital reserve depending on timing, amount, those sorts of things.
Given the time constraints around the ARPA stuff, to the extent that we have eligible projects, I would aim to use those funds.
Yeah, I think we want to use those
Use
first.
them for anything we can identify, right?
Yep.
What does used mean?
So there is obligated, which if we have a contract or we have placed a purchase, we can consider it obligated. And then actually expended has to be by 2026. So if we had a contractor, as long as we had a contract with them by December 2024, we'd be fine under ARPA requirements. And as long as they completed the work and we fully paid them by 2026, we'd be fine.
So you need a third party involved in the obligation.
Yes.
You can't simply sign a resolution that says we intend to do this.
No, that would just be the appropriation.
Okay, fine. Good, thank you.
Page 12 shows you sewer and parking. They came out really well. Oh, sorry, page 12 is sewer, page 13 is parking. 14 is the recreation program fund and the Great Island Management Fund. There's not much more here than what we had on the first couple pages. And then we get into active bonded projects. Not a lot of activity here with the hold off on HHR. Those were kind of our big spenders, so there's not much movement on these.
Remind us, Jen, so I'm looking at Hinley, Holmes, and Royal. I'm looking at the last line, estimated bond issue deadline of September 1st, 25. So first of all, what does that mean? And second of all, what does it mean to be estimated?
So there are requirements. Page 19 gives you a little bit of information on that. So there's no limit to when we must borrow the funds that are authorized but unissued. But once we start spending money, the clock starts ticking.
Right.
If we haven't spent money, it doesn't matter. So it's either not later than 18 months after the date of the original expenditure or the date the project is placed in service. But it can't be later than 3 months after the original expenditure is paid. So
3 years.
3 years. So initially we start with what's the 18 months from the first expenditure. But then we look at how the project is progressing. And if it's going to get into service much later, then we can start pushing what that date is. And something like Oxbridge or HHR, where there's multiple rounds of funding, that date keeps moving because with each bond issue, you fully expend that and then your clock kind of starts over. But this is just our way of tracking and making sure that we don't miss any of those deadlines and aren't able to.
So you have to start the you have to issue the bonds within 18 months of your first money spent, but not later than 3 years after your first money spent.
Right.
So you have 3 years, but it can shrink to 18 months.
Right.
So I guess my question is, we have spent money on all 3 of these projects.
Right.
Right, so the clock is ticking.
Right.
So September 1st, 25, with the year delay, what is the estimate? I know we're going out to bid, so this is just an estimate. What's the estimated completion date of those 3 projects? Is that a relevant question, or?
Well, what we can do with HHR is we're going to do another bond issue in the spring because we have the notes coming due, which were a lot of HHR money there. And we can just permanently finance the portion that we've already spent, pay ourselves back. We've met our deadlines and we're good. At that point, if we know what HHR schedule looks like, we might issue more notes to at least provide the cash
So
flow.
the notes give us the flexibility that we might not otherwise have.
Yep. And then the other side of that is it helps us spread our debt service impact a little bit.
But the portion of this that was done in bonds would have to be expended by that 3-year deadline.
Right, but we haven't done any bonds on HHR.
We just did notes, okay.
Yep, just notes.
We should know what it's gonna cost by late October or sometime in November, because the plan is to go to rebid in September, beginning of October. And so then we'll get those bids in and, do the selection
And
process.
That'll give us plenty of time to work it into the next issue.
Yeah, and to
in
the
early
extent
2024.
that we have to come back before the town to seek additional funding, we would plan to do that in the October, November timeframe.
My concern was the deadline, and since we're in notes, we're okay.
Yep,
Because given the Ox Ridge history, it's not likely that construction would be completed by September of '25, is it, or is that?
No, that's not gonna happen.
Right.
Because we're not
Right.
gonna start until late spring, beginning of summer 24.
24,
Right?
okay.
So call it the standard 3-year schedule, that rolls us to August of 27.
But to clarify for the public, that's not an issue because we're in notes.
right.
Okay.
And because we'll be issuing in a couple of tranches.
Okay.
So we'll be okay on that.
Are these deadlines of the full 3 years, or they're the 18-month?
On those, let me see. They are option B, which is 18 months after the date the project is placed in service. So that was just at the beginning
For the full 3 years?
where taking advantage of the full 3 years, yep. But on a project like that, that's always going to move. And once we borrow, it kind of resets the clock. We spend down what we borrowed, and the clock starts ticking. Once that's all spent, then it becomes, the first expenditure after that first tranche is all spent becomes the new initial expenditure to start the clock.
And
Okay.
any insight into when the closeout for the state grants will be for the homes, roof, and skylight, or the?
No,
the
I
roof?
checked with Board of Ed on that, and they have no additional information available at this time. So I think what I'm gonna do is we'll just move the excess, we'll go with their estimate of the 70,000, and I think it was 30,000. Assume that we're gonna get that amount. We'll move the excess borrowings probably over to the DHS track.
Okay.
Because that's an active project that hasn't been funded yet. And then if the state reimbursement comes in different than their estimate,
We'll
we'll
true up at that
we'll true it
time.
up, yeah.
Okay.
But I don't want to miss the deadline for us to move those excess proceeds out.
And if my memory serves, we're the last tranche of the Ox Ridge state reimbursement is somewhat dependent on our sustainability rating. So there are minor modifications being made to get another star or point. You get points and you go to like silver, gold, platinum. So depending on where you land, that's worth dollars at the state level.
Okay.
So I think the difference between, I think where Oxbridge's is likely to be gold, but the delta from where they are to getting to platinum is not worth the investment to get there.
Yeah.
So that's my recollection. Okay.
All right, page 20, Great Island. So, I'm looking at this now, I think I'll add a subtotal under use of funds. That first section was all related to the actual acquisition expended up through the date of the closing. And then this next section is post-closing expenditures, of which we had about $6 million available. And to date, we've spent 147, and I've provided you the various categories where those have been spent. And again, this will just get refined as the committee does their work and we move forward on the expenditures. And then page 21 through 23 is a bit of a revision on ARPA. So the top sections, number 1, public health active projects, we've just have the POD in the box. And then the active projects for revenue replacement are the rest of page 21 and 22. And then on page 23, you'll see that we've pulled down into a separate area the completed projects. So those are the ones that you closed out last meeting.
How difficult would it be for Great Island and for ARPA to include a change since last report column, a delta column, just so that when we see the ARPA report next month, we can see what was spent in the last 30 days? Is that?
Yeah, we could do that. Definitely.
Same thing with Great Island, because they're
Yeah.
just material accounts. We can see the progress being made. Thank you.
I think that was it for the financial report. Yep.
Yep, thank you, Jen. The next agenda item is to approve the minutes of the July 18th, 2023 regular meeting. I had a small typo, but other than that, I didn't think there was anything. Anyone else? I'll share the typo later. Can I have a motion to approve the Board of Finance regular meeting minutes for July 18th, 2023? Dave? Rob seconds. All in favor? Okay. Committee reports.
I'll be brief. You guys know that we're going through the process of getting ready to rebid. The HHR meeting from July 26th has a tremendous amount of detail about that process and how it's going to play out in terms of retaining certain bids that were previously submitted, those types of things. The timing, we have another meeting tomorrow, and in that meeting tomorrow, we're going to review a bidding analysis that was put together, each trade package, the number of bidders, high, low, and variance from budget. And O&G is supposed to give us an update to better refine the schedule and the timing for events, because they sort of just gave us, beginning, end of kind of things for last time around. So just quickly, the important dates are they're going to be preparing to rebid all of the packages that will be rebid in September. They'll collect those bids and do scope reviews with potential winning bidders in late September and beginning of October. We would then, to the extent necessary, if we need additional funds, try to seek those through the town in October or November. And then they would execute the guaranteed maximum price contract in December. So, and then the planned construction would be beginning, end of, as soon as practical after school ends, in this coming spring. So basically, just everything pushed out 1 year.
How many bid packages were solicited and how many are being rebid?
I can tell you that if I look at these notes. There were 240 companies that were invited to bid. And I don't remember, it's not written here exactly how many total companies did bid. And to the best of my knowledge, unless they tell us something different tomorrow, they haven't decided which companies they will ask to retain.
I'm sorry, so how many bid packages were, so how many bids
So
were
there were-
solicited? 17, or it was like 7?
There were 16 bid packages.
16
for
bid
different-
packages
Different
and-
components of the project.
And how many of those 16 are being rebid? All of them or some?
But that decision hasn't
Hasn't been made.
hasn't been made yet.
Okay.
But you can imagine the criteria, right? Any package that came in under budget or close to budget, we will look to ask them to retain, because, basically, the bidder avoids having to pay overtime for the weeks that we were going to ask for 6-day work weeks, but then they have the escalation that normally occurs from pushing out 1 year and rising labor costs and other types of things like that. So we will see exactly how that process plays out.
Thank you.
Is anyone keeping a macro view on all of these increases and so on? I mean, some of them are exponential, 4 and 5 times what was originally estimated. And then not necessarily buildings, but obviously things like flood repairs and so on are way, way higher than we estimated. The fire rescue truck cost twice what was originally estimated. Is someone re-estimating all of the projects that are out there that the people want done, so that we in fact have a view as to whether in fact we have adequate capital to simply approve them as they come along because they're nice things to do, or whether in fact priorities need to be set?
In the 6-year capital plan, everybody updates their estimates for both the budget year as well as the 5 out years.
Have they done that? Or-
The fire commission was requested to update their vehicle estimates, and we haven't gotten that yet. We'll make sure that we have that for the next budget. But on something like the larger construction projects that don't necessarily run through the budget, those are all kind of done on their own.
Well, then should they in fact be aggregated so that one can view them in terms of the town's comfort with how to fund them?
To me, it seems like a worthwhile exercise, except for the fact that these projects are very different, and they require different levels of expertise, perhaps, to give us a current and best estimate, which we may not want to pay for. So, for example, the flooding, I mean, the reason the estimates changed is we got basic studies done, which we had to pay for. So we paid for the study on Tilly and Grove, and we paid for the study on Salt Box. And that's how the estimates changed materially, I think, on those 2 projects. It seems like the other material projects are the fire apparatus. I'm not sure, off the top of my head, others might, what other projects might lend themselves to like a desktop revaluation or re-estimate versus having to go out and get an expert.
No, I'm not either, which is why I asked the question.
The only other ones that I think are significant, but Ed is in the process of doing the engineering and design, would be like Hanson Road bridge repairs.
Right.
The bridge work that's budgeted in ARPA.
What about sidewalks?
I think we usually pay like a,
It's a per linear foot usually.
It's a per linear foot, and we get, from when we do the, for example, when we're doing the 2024 budget, Ed would have budgeted that reflecting the prices for things that he was seeing,
Right.
that he was putting out to bid for this summer, right? So my guess is those are short lead time from, your most recent price update, and it's not like the sidewalk is super complicated, right? It's pretty straightforward.
But the
You just
inflation
can't-
in the paving was notable, right?
Well, you can't-
So I would
Well,
think
because of
concrete
the,
would be
yeah,
too.
because of the petroleum related stuff, yeah. But
So we
that
talked
would have been
about that.
reflected,
Yeah.
that would have been reflected, because he would have been getting bids for the work he was gonna do this summer and in the spring, right? And those prices would have been reflected in what he budgeted for 2024.
I think it's challenging to ask a department head to take a forward view on commodity prices, right? So they're going to use the best information they have, and if prices go up, they go up. So that's what happened on paving, right? Is that,
Oh, yeah.
that
It's been very
petroleum
volatile.
prices went up, which is the, I mean, I think we can encourage our department heads to make sure that any item they have on the 6-year capital plan has the best information they have available, but I presume they're already doing that.
Yeah.
I think to the heart of John's point, though, is we're going to probably end up spending more than we expected to on just about everything, right? Whether it's concrete or paving or trucks or whatever. And that's a reality of, where we're headed. In addition to the spending projects we've taken on, there's inflation that just doesn't want to stop.
Well, again, to be hyperbolic, is the town simply going to fund everything that they think is a nice thing to do, or does it need, or should it consider priorities in case of us running anywhere near close to getting our rating?
I don't think.
That's our decision.
That's our
That's
decision, yeah,
That's this
I was gonna
board's
say.
decision, what to fund and what not to
We
fund. right?
figure that out on a per project
And the Board of
basis as
Selectmen's
they come.
responsibility is to prioritize to some degree, but we have, that's our responsibilities to choose what to fund and what not to fund, or what to decrease fund.
That is true, but shouldn't the Board of Selectmen possibly coordinate with us to make sure that, in fact, if we don't think it can be funded, that they don't spend a lot of time talking about it? I'm just talking about priorities, and I mean, look, capital is scarce for everybody in the world, and it's just a matter of spending that capital properly and making sure that we get a return on to the town on our investment. That's really all I'm talking about. And no, we can't predict the future, but effectively, all of us that have been in business have spent our business lives predicting the future. That's what you have to do to run a business. So I'm simply talking about being aware of all of this, not letting things, I mean, frankly, I was very surprised at the increase, and not unexpected, but just very surprised at the increase in the cost of the schools. And it's a lot of money to all of a sudden have something come back. Nobody could have necessarily anticipated it, but we're in a terribly inflationary environment right now, and it's just a matter of not getting caught unawares and have something happen to us that we could not have anticipated. A quick question on Rings End is Ed working on the cost of the dam?
I don't know. I can check with him where he stands on that.
Other committee reports?
Audit, sounds like it's starting next month?
Yeah, they're here the week of September 11th.
After June is closed.
Closed, yes.
Not just
Kind of closed. So we are uploading things to them as they're ready because they have some staffing challenges. So we're being pushed a little bit to get things to them as early as possible so that they can do their part and we can file on time.
That is the theme across accounting firms
Yes.
in this country, staffing challenges.
Right.
And then the town has completed its negotiations with DPW union, and Jen, you want to summarize that for us?
I would say that we have, I think it's an agreement that is fair to both the town and the union. It will be going to the union membership to ratify. It's getting written up by HR, just clarifying all the points that were agreed to. So it'll go to the DPW union to ratify, then it'll come through the town boards for approval. I think we're probably looking at September or October. It might be on your September agenda, it might hit RTM in October, it might be all of you in October.
The administrators, the school administrators' discussions are just getting going. On the Oxbridge side, as of last Thursday, the academic wing was 99% completed, the assembly wing was 97% completed. Both buildings are well, the academic wing has been in use for some time now, the entire school year. The assembly wing is expected to be entirely ready for the school year, as are the parking lot, the roads, and the playground. There may be some site work left to be done, but it shouldn't interfere with any of the student activities or parking or teacher activities, etc. We are, I think, inside 2 weeks, or right around 2 weeks from back to school. So
15 days.
15 days.
Not that I'm counting.
So hopefully at our next meeting we'll have a, they're already talking about a ribbon cutting ceremony, so that's touch wood. We'll have good news to report on back to school and full use of the assembly wing.
Excellent job on that, and thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Nothing on chairman's report, no new business. May I have a motion to adjourn? John? Second, Rob, all in favor? 53 minutes, Jim.
Beat it.